The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat in her private study reviewing the day's schedule. Her fingers traced the edge of a delicate porcelain teacup, steam rising gently from the Earl Grey within. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the soft knock of her private secretary. "Your Royal Highness, the Queen Consort has requested a private audience this afternoon," Maria announced, her voice carrying a note of formality that suggested this wasn't a casual social call. Catherine looked up from her papers, a slight furrow forming between her brows. Camilla rarely requested formal meetings, preferring instead the casual conversations that happen naturally during family gatherings. Something about this felt different, more serious. "Did she mention what this concerns?" Catherine asked, setting down her teacup with careful precision. "No, ma'am. Only that it was a matter of some importance regarding upcoming royal engagements." Catherine nodded slowly. The royal calendar had been particularly demanding lately, with several high-profile events requiring careful coordination between the working members of the family. Perhaps Camilla needed to discuss scheduling conflicts or protocol adjustments. Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Prince William was deep in conversation with his private secretary about the upcoming state visit from the President of France. The logistics were complex, involving multiple security briefings, ceremonial protocols, and diplomatic considerations. His phone buzzed with a text message from Catherine, informing him of Camilla's requested meeting. William paused in his discussion, something stirring uneasily in his stomach. His stepmother had been increasingly assertive about royal protocols lately, particularly when it came to matters involving the crown jewels and ceremonial regalia. There had been subtle tensions brewing beneath the surface of family interactions, tensions that William had hoped would resolve themselves naturally over time. The afternoon arrived with an unseasonable chill, clouds gathering over London as Catherine made her way to Clarence House for the meeting. The familiar surroundings of Camilla's official residence felt somehow different today, charged with an undercurrent of formality that made Catherine's shoulders tense slightly as she was escorted to the Queen Consort's private sitting room. Camilla rose gracefully as Catherine entered, her smile warm but, her eyes carrying a businesslike glint that Catherine had learned to recognize over the years. They exchanged the customary pleasantries, discussing the children's school activities and the upcoming charity gala that Catherine was organizing for her early childhood development initiative. "Catherine, dear, I hope you'll forgive the formal nature of this meeting," Camilla began, settling back into her chair with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to wielding authority. "But, there's a matter I need to discuss with you regarding the state banquet next week." Catherine nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. State banquets were always elaborate affairs, requiring careful attention to every detail from the seating arrangements to the selection of china and crystal. She assumed this would be about protocol or perhaps a last-minute change in the guest list. "As you know, the French president's visit is particularly significant for strengthening our diplomatic relationships post-Brexit," Camilla continued, her tone growing more serious. "The King and I have been discussing ways to ensure that every aspect of the evening reflects the grandeur and tradition of the British monarchy." Catherine waited, sensing that Camilla was building toward something specific. The older woman had a way of approaching delicate topics with careful preparation, laying groundwork before making her actual request. "The jewelry selection for such occasions carries tremendous symbolic weight," Camilla said, her gaze meeting Catherine's directly. "It communicates not just personal style, but the continuity and prestige of the crown itself." A small warning bell began ringing in Catherine's mind. She had already selected her jewelry for the banquet, planning to wear the Cambridge lover's knot tiara that had been a particular favorite of William's mother, Princess Diana. The choice held deep personal significance for her and William, representing both Diana's memory and Catherine's own role as the future Queen Consort. "I've been thinking," Camilla continued, her voice taking on a tone that was both casual and deliberately measured, "that perhaps it would be more appropriate for you to wear something that better represents the current reign. The Cambridge lover's knot, while beautiful, carries certain associations that might not be ideal for such an important diplomatic occasion." Catherine felt her breath catch slightly. The tiara wasn't just a piece of jewelry to her and William, it was a tangible connection to Diana's memory and legacy. Catherine had worn it on several significant occasions, each time feeling the weight of history and the responsibility of honoring the woman who had come before her. I'm not entirely sure I understand, Catherine said carefully, her voice maintaining its diplomatic calm even as her pulse quickened. Camilla leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more earnest. What I'm suggesting, dear, is that you consider wearing the George IV state diadem instead. It's more established in terms of royal precedent, and it would send a clear message about the strength and continuity of the monarchy under King Charles's reign. The request hung in the air between them like a challenge. Catherine understood immediately that this wasn't really about diplomatic symbolism or royal precedent. This was about the complex dynamics of power within the family, about establishing hierarchies and asserting influence in the subtle but significant language of royal protocol. The George IV state diadem is certainly magnificent, Catherine replied diplomatically, buying herself time to process the full implications of what was being asked. But I had already planned my ensemble around the Cambridge lover's knot. The coordination of jewelry, dress, and overall presentation requires considerable advance planning. Camilla's smile remained fixed, but Catherine caught a flash of something harder in her eyes. Of course, I understand the practical considerations. But surely you can appreciate the larger picture here, Catherine. This banquet will be photographed and reported on internationally. Every detail will be scrutinized and interpreted. We have an opportunity to present a unified vision of the monarchy's future. Catherine felt a familiar surge of protective instinct, the same feeling that arose whenever she sensed her family or her role being challenged in subtle ways. She had learned over the years to navigate these complex family dynamics with grace and intelligence, but this felt different, somehow more direct and less easily deflected. I appreciate your perspective, Camilla, Catherine said, her tone remaining respectful but firm. However, the Cambridge lover's knot has become quite associated with my public role, and I believe the continuity of that association is also important for public perception. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Camilla's practiced diplomacy never wavered, but Catherine could sense the frustration building beneath the surface. They were both highly intelligent women, well-versed in the art of royal communication where direct confrontation was rarely acceptable, but messages were conveyed nonetheless through tone, timing, and careful word choice. I had hoped you would be more flexible about this, Camilla said, her voice carrying a subtle edge that suggested this conversation was heading into more difficult territory. After all, we're all working toward the same goal of supporting the king and strengthening the institution of the monarchy. Catherine felt the implicit criticism in those words. The suggestion that her reluctance to comply with Camilla's request somehow indicated a lack of commitment to the broader royal mission was both unfair and strategically calculated to make her feel defensive. My commitment to the crown has never been in question, Catherine replied, her voice remaining steady despite the growing tension. Every decision I make regarding my public role is considered carefully in terms of its impact on the monarchy and the royal family. The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes, with both women maintaining their diplomatic facades while the underlying disagreement became increasingly clear. Camilla employed every tool in her considerable arsenal of persuasion, appealing to protocol, tradition, and family unity. Catherine responded with equal skill, acknowledging these concerns while subtly but firmly maintaining her position. As the meeting drew to a close, both women understood that they had reached an impasse. Camilla's final words carried a weight that suggested this disagreement would not be easily forgotten or forgiven. I do hope you'll reconsider, Catherine. It would be such a shame if personal preferences overshadowed what's best for the family and the crown. Catherine left Clarence House with her mind racing, knowing that this conversation would need to be shared with William immediately. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave her time to process what had just occurred and to prepare for what she knew would be her husband's likely reaction to Camilla's pressure tactics. The implications of this disagreement extended far beyond the choice of Tiara for a single event. It represented a fundamental question about authority and influence within the royal family, about who had the right to make decisions regarding the presentation and symbolism of the monarchy's future. Catherine understood that how this situation was handled would likely set precedents for future interactions and establish boundaries that would affect family dynamics for years to come. As she entered Kensington Palace, Catherine felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was not just a wife and mother in this moment, but a key figure in an institution that stretched back over 1,000 years. Every decision she made rippled outward, affecting not just her immediate family but the perception and stability of the monarchy itself. The confrontation with Camilla had awakened something protective and determined within her. Catherine had always been willing to compromise and find common ground, but there were some things that went too deep to be negotiated away. The Cambridge lover's knot tiara represented more than just a beautiful piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of continuity, memory, and the complex legacy that she and William were working to honor while building their own contribution to royal history. She knew that William would need to hear about this conversation immediately, and she could already anticipate his reaction. His protective instincts regarding his mother's memory and his wife's autonomy would undoubtedly be triggered by Camilla's approach. The evening ahead promised to be filled with difficult conversations and strategic planning as they decided how to respond to what was essentially a challenge to their independence within the family structure. The stakes were higher than they might appear on the surface. This wasn't just about one tiara or one event, but about the fundamental question of how the monarchy would evolve and who would have influence over that evolution. Catherine understood that she was at the center of a power dynamic that would shape the royal family's future, and she was determined to handle it with the wisdom and strength that her position demanded. William was reviewing security protocols in his study when Catherine returned from Clarence's house, her footsteps echoing softly in the marble hallway. He looked up as she entered, immediately noticing the tension in her shoulders and the careful way she closed the door behind her. After nearly 15 years together, he could read her moods with the accuracy of a weatherman predicting storms. "How did it go with Camilla?" he asked, setting aside his papers and giving her his full attention. The formal way Catherine had mentioned the meeting in her earlier text had already put him on alert. Catherine moved to the window overlooking their private garden, where their children's toys were scattered across the lawn from their morning play session. The sight of those familiar objects helped ground her as she prepared to relay the afternoon's events. "She wants me to change my tiara for the state banquet," Catherine said simply, knowing that William would understand immediately why this was problematic. William's expression shifted, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "The Cambridge lover's knot?" She suggested that George IV state diadem would be more appropriate. "More in keeping with the current reign," she said. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken understanding. William rose from his chair, running a hand through his hair in the gesture Catherine recognized as a sign of mounting frustration. The Cambridge lover's knot tiara wasn't just a piece of royal regalia to them, it was one of the few tangible connections Catherine had to his mother's memory and legacy. "What exactly did she say?" William asked, his voice carefully controlled but with an undercurrent that suggested a storm brewing beneath the surface. Catherine recounted the conversation in detail, watching as William's expression grew increasingly dark. She knew he was processing not just the specific request, but the broader implications of Camilla's approach and timing. The state banquet was less than a week away, making any last-minute changes to Catherine's ensemble both logistically challenging and symbolically significant. "This isn't about the tiara," William said finally, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "This is about establishing control and testing boundaries." Catherine nodded, relieved that he understood the deeper dynamics at play. "I tried to explain that I'd already planned my entire look around the Cambridge lover's knot, but she was quite persistent. She framed it as being in the best interests of the monarchy." William's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The strategic manipulation of family loyalty and institutional duty was a tactic he'd seen employed before, and it never failed to infuriate him. His mother had faced similar pressures during her time in the royal family, subtle but persistent attempts to control her choices and limit her independence. "Did she mention my father in this conversation?" William asked, suspecting that Camilla might have invoked the king's authority to strengthen her position. "She mentioned that she and your father had discussed the importance of the jewelry selection, but she didn't explicitly say he agreed with her suggestion." William felt his anger spike higher. The possibility that his father might be involved in this pressure campaign added another layer of betrayal to the situation. After years of carefully rebuilding their relationship and working to integrate Camilla into the family dynamic, this felt like a significant step backward. "I need to speak with my father," William said, reaching for his phone before pausing. "Actually, no. I need to think about this properly first." This requires a strategic response, not an emotional reaction. Catherine moved closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. She could feel the tension radiating from him and understood that his anger wasn't just about this specific incident, but about all the accumulated frustrations of navigating family politics while trying to honor his mother's memory. "William, we need to be careful how we handle this," she said softly. "Whatever we decide, it needs to be measured and thoughtful. We can't let our emotions drive our response." William looked at his wife with a mixture of love and admiration. Even in the face of what was essentially an attack on her autonomy, she was thinking strategically about the broader implications and long-term consequences. It was one of the qualities that made her such an effective member of the royal family and such a strong partner in their shared mission. "You're right, of course," he said, pulling her closer. "But, Catherine, this can't go unchallenged. If we allow this kind of manipulation now, it will only escalate. Camilla needs to understand that there are boundaries she cannot cross." They spent the next hour discussing their options, weighing the potential consequences of various responses. William wanted to confront Camilla directly, to make it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. Catherine favored a more diplomatic approach, one that addressed the immediate issue while preserving family relationships for the long term. "What if we involve your father?" Catherine suggested. "If Camilla really has his support for this, then we need to address it at that level. If she's acting independently, then he should know what she's doing in his name." William considered this carefully. His relationship with his father had improved significantly since becoming king, but it was still complicated by decades of history and the ongoing challenge of Camilla's role in the family. The idea of having to choose between supporting his wife and maintaining family harmony was exactly the kind of situation he'd hoped to avoid. "I'll speak with him tomorrow," William decided. "But I want you to know that regardless of what he says, you have my complete support in this. You're not changing your tiara, and you're not being bullied into compliance by anyone, including my stepmother." The conviction in his voice sent a wave of relief through Catherine. She had known she could count on his support, but hearing it stated so clearly and unequivocally strengthened her resolve to stand firm in her decision. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of their children returning from their afternoon activities. George, Charlotte, and Louis burst into the study with the enthusiasm that only young people could muster, full of stories about their day and eager for their parents' attention. For a few precious minutes, William and Catherine set aside the stress of royal politics and focused on the simple joy of being parents. But even as they listened to Charlotte's detailed account of her art class project and George's excitement about an upcoming football match, both parents were acutely aware that the decisions they made in the coming days would affect not just their own lives, but their children's future relationship with their royal heritage and family members. Later that evening, after the children had been tucked into bed, William and Catherine returned to their discussion with clearer heads and more strategic thinking. They mapped out various scenarios and potential outcomes, trying to anticipate Camilla's likely responses and their father's possible reactions. "The timing of this is interesting," Catherine observed, her analytical mind working through the political implications. "The French state visit is high profile, with extensive media coverage guaranteed. Whatever I wear will be photographed and analyzed by fashion experts and royal watchers around the world." William nodded grimly. "Which means if you change your tiara now, it will be noticed and commented upon. People will ask questions about why the switch was made so close to the event." The media implications added another layer of complexity to their decision. The British press had a particular fascination with royal jewelry choices, often reading deep symbolic meaning into every selection. Any last-minute change would inevitably spark speculation about family tensions and power dynamics. "We also need to consider the precedent this sets," William continued. "If Camilla succeeds in pressuring you to change your choice this time, what's to stop her from trying to control other aspects of your public role? Your charity work, your speaking engagements, even your fashion choices?" Catherine felt a chill run down her spine as she contemplated the broader implications. The autonomy she'd carefully built over more than a decade as a working royal could be gradually eroded if she didn't take a stand now. The thought of having to seek approval for every decision felt claustrophobic and fundamentally at odds with the kind of royal she wanted to be.
There's something else we need to discuss, Catherine said hesitantly.
Maria mentioned that several other staff members have noticed increased coordination between Clarence House and various royal household departments. It seems like Camilla might be trying to extend her influence beyond just this Tiara situation.
William's expression darkened further.
The royal household was a complex ecosystem of competing interests and traditional hierarchies, but it had always operated on the principle that each working royal maintained independence over their own staff and decision-making processes. If Camilla was trying to centralize control or influence other royals' choices through back-channel communications, it represented a significant shift in how the family operated.
Do we have specifics?
William asked, his mind already racing through the implications for their children's future and the long-term health of the monarchy. Catherine pulled out her phone and scrolled through several messages from Maria and other trusted staff members. There have been informal inquiries about your schedule, suggestions about which charities I should prioritize, even questions about the children's public appearances and educational choices.
The scope of Camilla's apparent interest in their family's decisions was breathtaking in its audacity. William felt his earlier anger transforming into something colder and more determined.
This wasn't just about one disagreement or one tiara, it was about fundamental questions of independence and autonomy within the royal family structure. We're dealing with a systematic attempt to establish control, William said, his voice taking on the tone he used during serious official business. This requires a comprehensive response, not just addressing the immediate tiara issue. Catherine nodded, understanding that they had moved beyond a simple family disagreement into something that could affect the monarchy's future structure and operation. The decisions they made in the coming days would establish precedents and boundaries that would govern royal family relationships for years to come. I think we need to involve our lawyers, Catherine said quietly. Not for litigation, but for advice on protocols and precedents.
We need to understand our rights and options within the existing royal framework. William agreed immediately.
The legal and constitutional aspects of royal family dynamics were incredibly complex, governed by centuries of precedent, tradition, and evolving modern practices. Having expert advice would help them navigate this challenge without inadvertently creating larger problems or constitutional issues. As the evening wore on, William and Catherine found themselves planning not just their response to Camilla's pressure campaign, but a broader strategy for protecting their family's independence and ensuring their children would inherit a healthy, balanced approach to royal duty and personal autonomy. The stakes had never been higher, and they both understood that how they handled this crisis would define not just their own future relationship with the royal family, but the kind of monarchy their children would one day inherit or support. The pressure was immense, but so was their determination to protect what they had built together and to honor the memory of those who had come before them while building something sustainable for the future. The next morning arrived grey and drizzling, London's weather matching the somber mood that had settled over Kensington Palace. William had barely slept, his mind churning through possible conversations with his father and strategies for addressing Camilla's overreach.
Catherine had also spent a restless night, alternating between anger at the situation and concern for the long-term implications of whatever response they chose.
William's private secretary had arranged a meeting with King Charles for late morning, ostensibly to discuss security arrangements for the upcoming state visit. But both William and Catherine knew the real purpose would be to address the growing tension that threatened to overshadow what should have been a significant diplomatic achievement. Before heading to Buckingham Palace, William spent time in his study reviewing documents that his legal advisors had prepared overnight.
The constitutional position of working royals was complex, governed by tradition rather than written law in many cases.
However, there were clear precedents establishing that senior royals maintained autonomy over their personal choices regarding ceremonial dress and jewelry, particularly when those items had personal or historical significance. Catherine, meanwhile, was meeting with her own team to discuss the practical implications of standing firm in her decision. Her senior dresser had confirmed that the Cambridge lover's knot tiara had already been cleaned, adjusted, and prepared for the state banquet. Changing to a different piece at this late stage would require significant coordination and might raise questions among the staff about the reasons for the switch.
Has there been any further communication from Clarence House? Catherine asked Maria, who was reviewing the day's correspondence. Nothing direct, ma'am. However, there have been several calls to various department heads asking about protocols for state banquet jewelry selection. It seems quite pointed. Catherine felt her resolve strengthen.
Camilla was clearly not prepared to let this matter drop quietly, instead choosing to escalate by involving other parts of the royal household machinery. The passive-aggressive nature of these inquiries was both transparent and infuriating.
William arrived at Buckingham Palace to find his father in the blue drawing room, reviewing briefing papers for the French president's visit.
King Charles looked up as his son entered, immediately sensing the tension in William's demeanor. "You seem troubled, William," the king observed, setting aside his papers.
"Is there something specific about the state visit that's concerning you?"
William had rehearsed this conversation multiple times in his head, but facing his father directly made the actual words more difficult. The relationship between them had taken years to rebuild after Diana's death, and William was reluctant to damage that progress.
However, he couldn't allow Camilla's behavior to go unaddressed. "It's about Catherine and the state banquet," William began carefully.
"Specifically, about pressure she's receiving regarding her choice of jewelry for the event." King Charles's expression shifted slightly, a barely perceptible tightening around his eyes that suggested he might already know what this conversation was about.
"What sort of pressure?" William recounted Catherine's meeting with Camilla, watching his father's face carefully for any reaction.
The king listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious as the full scope of the situation became clear. "Camilla mentioned that you had discussed the importance of jewelry selection for the banquet," William said, his tone carefully neutral. "I wanted to clarify whether you were aware of the specific nature of her conversation with Catherine." The king was quiet for several long moments, clearly processing the implications of what his son had shared. William could see the conflict playing out behind his father's eyes, the desire to support his wife while also respecting his son and daughter-in-law's autonomy. "I did discuss the general importance of presenting a unified royal image," King Charles said finally. "But I did not specifically suggest that Catherine should change her planned jewelry selection, nor did I authorize anyone to pressure her into doing so." William felt a mixture of relief and mounting anger. Relief that his father wasn't directly behind the pressure campaign, but anger that Camilla had essentially acted without authority while implying royal backing for her position.
"Father, with respect, Camilla used your name and authority to try to force Catherine to comply with her preferences.
This goes beyond a simple difference of opinion about jewelry choices.
It's about autonomy and respect within our family structure."
King Charles rose from his chair and moved to the window, looking out over the palace gardens where tourists were already gathering despite the early hour.
William could see his father wrestling with the competing demands of supporting his wife while maintaining family harmony.
"What exactly is it that you want me to do, William?" the king asked, turning back to face his son. "I want you to make it clear to Camilla that this behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Catherine has every right to make her own choices about her appearance and ceremonial dress, particularly when it involves items with such personal and historical significance."
The reference to the tiara's connection to Diana hung in the air between them.
Both men understood the deeper emotional currents at play, the way this disagreement touched on unresolved family dynamics that stretched back decades. The Cambridge lover's knot tiara has become quite associated with Catherine's public role, the king acknowledged slowly.
Changing it now would certainly raise questions and could create unwanted speculation about family relationships.
William pressed his advantage.
"More importantly, father, allowing this kind of manipulation to succeed sets a dangerous precedent. If Camilla can pressure Catherine about jewelry choices today, what's to stop her from trying to control other aspects of our work and public roles tomorrow?"
The king returned to his seat, his expression grave. William could see that his father was beginning to understand the broader implications of what had occurred and the potential consequences of not addressing it firmly. "There's something else," William continued, deciding to lay all their cards on the table. "This appears to be part of a broader pattern of attempts to influence our family's decisions. Our staff have noticed increased coordination between Clarence House and various royal household departments, with informal inquiries about our schedules, charity work, and even the children's activities." King Charles's expression darkened significantly. The idea that his wife might be conducting a systematic campaign to extend her influence over other family members' decisions was clearly troubling to him. The royal family had learned hard lessons about the dangers of internal power struggles and their impact on public perception. "Those are serious allegations, William," the king said slowly.
"They're not allegations, father. They're facts that we've documented and verified. The question now is what we're going to do about it."
The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with both men working through the complex web of family relationships, institutional traditions, and practical considerations that shaped their options. King Charles was clearly torn between his loyalty to Camilla and his recognition that her behavior had crossed acceptable boundaries. Meanwhile, back at Kensington Palace, Catherine was dealing with her own challenges. Word of the disagreement had somehow reached certain members of the royal household staff, creating an undercurrent of tension that threatened to disrupt preparations for the state visit. Several department heads had called seeking clarification about procedures and protocols, clearly uncomfortable with the conflicting signals they were receiving. Catherine's phone rang with a call from her closest friend and confidant, Sophie, the Countess of Wessex. Sophie had navigated her own share of royal family politics over the years and had become a trusted advisor for Catherine during difficult situations. "I heard there might be some turbulence ahead of the state banquet," Sophie said diplomatically, well aware that royal phone calls were often monitored or overheard.
"Is there anything you need to discuss?"
Catherine was grateful for Sophie's careful phrasing and diplomatic approach. "There have been some differences of opinion about protocol matters. Nothing that can't be resolved, but it's created some unnecessary stress during an already complicated preparation period."
Sophie understood immediately.
"These things have a way of working themselves out, but it's important to stay true to your principles while being strategic about the bigger picture.
Sometimes standing firm early prevents bigger problems later."
The conversation with Sophie helped clarify Catherine's thinking about the broader implications of this confrontation. It wasn't just about one tiara or one event, but about establishing her position within the family hierarchy and protecting her ability to fulfill her royal role authentically and independently. When William returned from Buckingham Palace, he found Catherine in their private sitting room, surrounded by briefing papers for her upcoming charity engagements.
She looked up as he entered, immediately reading the tension in his expression.
"How did it go with your father?" she asked, setting aside her papers. William sank into the chair beside her, running a hand through his hair in frustration.
"He didn't authorize Camilla's approach, but he's reluctant to directly confront her about it. He's concerned about family harmony and doesn't want to create a larger conflict." Catherine felt a familiar surge of disappointment.
She had hoped that King Charles would take a stronger stance against his wife's overreach, but she wasn't entirely surprised by his reluctance to get involved directly. "So where does that leave us?" she asked.
"With a choice to make," William replied grimly.
"We can back down and hope this doesn't escalate further, or we can take a stand and accept whatever consequences follow."
Catherine considered their options carefully.
Backing down might preserve short-term peace, but it would also establish a precedent that could be exploited in future situations. Standing firm carried risks, but it might be necessary to protect their long-term autonomy and effectiveness as working royals.
"What did you tell your father about our decision?" she asked.
"I told him that you would be wearing the Cambridge Lovers Knot tiara as originally planned, and that any further attempts to pressure you or interfere with our family's decisions would not be tolerated." Catherine felt a wave of gratitude toward her husband for his unwavering support. Whatever challenges they faced in the coming days, they would face them together as a united team.
How did he respond to that? William's expression was grim.
"He asked me to consider the broader implications for family relationships and the monarchy's public image. He's concerned that a public disagreement could overshadow the diplomatic importance of the French visit." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on both of them. They weren't just husband and wife dealing with family drama, they were senior members of an institution that represented the British people and played a significant role in international diplomacy. Every decision they made had ripple effects that extended far beyond their personal preferences or comfort. "We need to be very careful about how we handle the next few days," Catherine said thoughtfully.
"Whatever we do needs to be measured and strategic. We can't allow personal emotions to drive decisions that affect the monarchy's reputation.
William nodded, appreciating once again his wife's ability to see the bigger picture even when under pressure.
The state banquet is in 3 days. Between now and then, we need to prepare for whatever response Camilla might have to our decision to stand firm.
They spent the rest of the afternoon developing contingency plans and strategies for various scenarios. Both understood that their marriage and partnership would be tested in the coming days, but they also knew that how they handled this challenge would define their relationship with the royal family for years to come. The day of the state banquet arrived with unusual fanfare, even by royal standards. The French president's visit had generated significant international media attention, and photographers lined the streets around Buckingham Palace hoping to capture every detail of the evening's proceedings. Inside the palace, staff moved with practiced efficiency, putting the finishing touches on arrangements that had been months in planning. Catherine stood in her dressing room at Kensington Palace, her hair and makeup complete, as her senior dresser made final adjustments to her elegant navy evening gown. The Cambridge Lovers' Knot tiara sat in its custom case nearby, its diamonds catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. The sight of it filled Catherine with a complex mixture of emotions, pride, determination, and a touch of sadness that such a beautiful moment had become the center of family conflict. "You look absolutely magnificent, ma'am," her dresser said with genuine warmth. "The tiara complements the gown perfectly." Catherine smiled, grateful for the professional calm that surrounded her even as her mind raced through potential scenarios for the evening ahead. She knew that every aspect of her appearance would be scrutinized and analyzed, that photographs of her wearing the Cambridge Lovers' Knot would appear in newspapers and magazines around the world. The weight of that attention felt heavier than usual given the circumstances. William appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his formal evening wear, medals precisely placed across his chest. He paused for a moment, taking in the sight of his wife in all her royal grandeur, and Catherine saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes: love, pride, and determination to protect what they had built together.
"Ready?" he asked simply, offering her his arm.
"Ready," Catherine replied, allowing her dresser to carefully place the tiara on her head. The familiar weight of it settled into place, and she felt a surge of connection to all the women who had worn royal regalia before her, particularly William's mother, who had made this particular tiara so iconic. Their journey to Buckingham Palace was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts about the evening ahead. The streets were lined with well-wishers and curious onlookers, their faces bright with excitement at catching a glimpse of the royal couple. Catherine waved and smiled, but her mind was on the complex family dynamics that would play out behind the scenes of the public spectacle. At Buckingham Palace, they were greeted by the familiar choreography of major state occasions. Senior household staff guided them through final briefings and protocol reminders while photographers captured every angle of their arrival. Catherine noticed several staff members glancing at her tiara with particular interest, clearly aware of the significance of her choice to wear it despite the recent pressure. King Charles approached them in the state drawing room where the royal family was gathering before the formal reception. He looked distinguished in his evening wear, but Catherine could see the tension around his eyes that suggested the past few days had been difficult for him as well. "Catherine, you look absolutely stunning," he said warmly, though Catherine caught a meaningful glance he directed toward her tiara. "That piece has such wonderful history, and it suits you perfectly." Catherine felt a wave of relief at the king's words. While not a direct repudiation of Camilla's pressure campaign, his public approval of her choice sent a clear message to anyone who might be watching family dynamics carefully. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Catherine replied graciously. "I've always felt honored to wear pieces that connect us to the monarchy's history and traditions." The subtle emphasis on tradition was deliberate, reminding everyone present that her choice was grounded in precedent and continuity rather than stubbornness or defiance. King Charles nodded approvingly, understanding the diplomatic nature of her response. Camilla joined them a few minutes later, wearing an elegant emerald green gown and the Queen Mary's diamond Riviere necklace. She looked every inch the Queen consort, but Catherine noticed a certain stiffness in her demeanor that hadn't been present at previous family gatherings. Their eyes met briefly, and Catherine saw a flash of something that might have been respect alongside the obvious disappointment. "Catherine, dear, how lovely you look," Camilla said with practiced warmth, though her gaze lingered on the Cambridge Lovers' Knot tiara for just a moment too long.
I hope you're feeling well prepared for this evening's festivities.
Very much so, thank you, Catherine replied with equal warmth and diplomacy.
It promises to be a wonderful celebration of British-French friendship.
The exchange was polite and appropriate, but both women understood that they were speaking in code about much more than the evening's events. Camilla's subtle acknowledgement of Catherine's choice to wear the disputed tiara was as close to a concession as they were likely to get, while Catherine's gracious response indicated that she bore no personal animosity despite standing firm in her decision. William watched this interaction carefully, proud of his wife's grace under pressure while remaining alert for any signs that the conflict might escalate. He positioned himself slightly closer to Catherine, a subtle but clear indication of where his loyalties lay should any further challenges arise. The formal reception began with the arrival of the French president and his wife, and soon the palace's staterooms were filled with distinguished guests from both countries. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced ease, engaging in conversations about trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and various charitable initiatives. Several guests complimented her on her appearance, and she noticed that international photographers were particularly interested in capturing images of her wearing the iconic tiara. During the formal dinner, Catherine found herself seated between a French cabinet minister and a British business leader, both eager to discuss her charitable work and its international implications. The conversation was engaging and substantive, reminding her of why she valued her public role and why maintaining her autonomy was so important for her effectiveness as a working royal.
From across the elaborate dining table, she caught William's eye several times during the evening.
He was deep in conversation with French officials about environmental initiatives and seemed thoroughly in his element. The sight of him filled Catherine with renewed appreciation for their partnership and shared commitment to using their platform for meaningful purposes. As the evening progressed, Catherine became aware that her choice of tiara was indeed generating attention and commentary among the international media covering the event. Several royal correspondents approached her during the reception, asking about the significance of wearing such an iconic piece for this particular occasion. The Cambridge Lovers' Knot has become quite special to me over the years, Catherine replied to one journalist's question.
It represents continuity and tradition, values that I think are important in both royal service and international diplomacy.
The response was carefully crafted to emphasize positive themes while avoiding any direct reference to the recent family tensions. Catherine knew that her words would be analyzed and reported internationally, so every phrase had been chosen to project strength, grace, and commitment to her role. Later in the evening, as the formal proceedings wound down and guests moved to other reception rooms for continued conversations, Catherine found herself approached by several senior female diplomats and business leaders. They complimented her on her role in the evening's success and spoke admiringly of her public work and charitable initiatives. "You've really made that tiara your own over the years," observed the French president's wife during a quiet moment between them. "It's become quite symbolic of your approach to royal duty, respectful of tradition but confident in your own style." The comment struck Catherine as particularly meaningful, coming from someone outside the British royal family who could observe their dynamics with some objectivity. It reinforced her sense that wearing the Cambridge Lovers' Knot had been not just personally important, but strategically correct for her public image and role. As the evening concluded and guests began departing, the royal family gathered for the traditional post-event debrief. King Charles was clearly pleased with how the diplomatic aspects of the evening had proceeded, and several senior household staff reported positive feedback from both British and French delegations. "The international press coverage appears to have been very positive," reported the palace's communications director. "Particular attention has been paid to the elegance and historical significance of the royal family's presentation this evening." Catherine exchanged a meaningful glance with William, both understanding that this positive coverage validated their decision to resist pressure for last-minute changes. The evening had been a diplomatic success, and her appearance had contributed to rather than detracted from that achievement.
In the days that followed, the impact of Catherine's choice became even more apparent.
Fashion magazines around the world featured extensive coverage of her appearance at the state banquet, with particular focus on the Cambridge Lovers' Knot tiara and its historical significance. Several articles traced the piece's journey from Queen Mary to Princess Diana to Catherine herself, emphasizing themes of continuity and royal tradition. The positive international attention seemed to settle the question of whether Catherine's choice had been appropriate for such a significant diplomatic occasion. More importantly, the coverage established a clear narrative about her role and approach that would influence future media coverage and public perception. Within the royal family, the aftermath of the tiara controversy led to important conversations about boundaries, respect, and decision-making processes. King Charles arranged separate meetings with both William and Camilla to address the underlying tensions and establish clearer expectations for future interactions. While the specific details of these conversations remained private, their effects became apparent in subsequent family interactions. Camilla's approach to working with other family members became noticeably more collaborative and less directive, while William and Catherine felt more confident in asserting their independence when necessary. The children, who had been largely shielded from the adult tensions, continued their normal routines and activities. However, Catherine and William used the experience as a teaching moment about standing up for principles while maintaining respect for family relationships and institutional responsibilities. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about important things, Catherine explained to Charlotte during one of their private conversations. When that happens, it's important to listen to different viewpoints but also to stay true to what you believe is right. The lessons from the tiara controversy extended far beyond jewelry choices or family dynamics. For Catherine and William, it reinforced their commitment to working as a team while maintaining their individual autonomy within the royal framework. They emerged from the experience stronger and more confident in their ability to navigate complex challenges while protecting their family's interests and values. The Cambridge Lovers' Knot tiara returned to its place in the royal collection, but its significance had evolved. No longer just a beautiful piece of jewelry with historical importance, it had become a symbol of Catherine's growing confidence in her role and her willingness to stand firm when her principles were challenged. For the monarchy as an institution, the resolution of this conflict established important precedents about the balance between family harmony and individual autonomy. It demonstrated that even within the highly structured world of royal protocol, there was room for independent decision-making and personal choice, provided those decisions were made thoughtfully and with appropriate consideration for broader implications. The French state visit was ultimately remembered as a diplomatic triumph, strengthening relationships between the two countries and showcasing the best aspects of British royal tradition. But, for those who understood the behind-the-scenes dynamics, it also represented a significant moment in the evolution of the royal family's internal relationships and power structures. Catherine's grace under pressure and William's unwavering support for his wife had created a new template for how future challenges might be addressed. They had proven that it was possible to maintain respect for family relationships while refusing to compromise on fundamental principles, setting a standard that would influence royal family dynamics for years to come.